everyone. We're just on a couple of minutes early. I'm waiting for some people to pop up. So just bear with us. We're making sure everything is good. Okay, so I'm getting ready over here. I'm just setting up my phone and setting up everything. And I'm just going to my notes on my phone so I could follow up with everyone. We're going to get started right at 11 o'clock, but it is a little early, so just bear with me. I turned off all my notifications for the live, so now I have to go searching for where I am. Not seeing the live. Are we on the right page?
Somebody's, oh, you got 21 people that says
Okay.
live on there.
So is everyone seeing me on the Janome live? Just give me some thumbs up, some hearts.
I'm seeing messages, but I don't see any.
So are you seeing messages, Sam?
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get into the live on my phone, and for some reason, it's
Yep, I
not.
see thumbs up now, so they're hearing you.
They're hearing me, they're good. I'm just trying to get to my comments. And we're still a little early, so I'm going to wait for 11 o'clock on the dot. I'm just going to turn those settings back on.
You got 34 watching now.
Perfect. Now I got all my questions, and I am seeing. Hi, Kathy. Mitzi. I am seeing a lot of people that are on and watching me, and I'm about to turn around. So, did everyone get their supply list and their fabric cutting instructions? There should be a link to that coming up. And I'm going to be following the order of the instructions, or trying to stay as close to that as possible. So I got a lot of questions early on about the class. Will my machine be able to do this? And really, even from the most basic of machines, we should be okay with following through. We're basically using 2 feet, a zipper foot and a 1/4 inch foot, or something to get an accurate seam allowance. And I'm just double checking on the time. Are we at 11 o'clock?
Yeah, you're about a minute.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm going to get started. I have one of our other educators helping me, Sam. I am so thankful, Sam, that you were able to help me. Maybe we'll get you to say hi on camera at some point. He's on the shy side. So I love this project because you can utilize border prints. And I've done that with the first one that I did right here. I did a tote bag with this and had just enough left over. And that's what made me think of this reading pillow class. So the reason this is a reading pillow is the pillow has a pocket on the front to put in a book. My friends have said that their children like putting their stuffed animals in here to give them a home as their beds are made and everything like that. So I'm really glad that everyone is here. I'm going to go over the first few things that we're going to be doing. I had a tough time finding cording. So the 1/8" cording, sometimes you can get a thin clothesline. I wound up using paracord, available at Dollar Tree. So that's what I will be using today. If you've never done piping before, and a few of you were very nervous about that, rather than 4 pieces, cut yourself a 5th piece just to give you a little bit more leeway. So what I'm going to do is go over to the machine, and I'm trying to tell Sam when I'm moving so that he knows where I'm going and what I'm doing. So what I will be using today is the single dual feed foot. This has the VD and the ED attachment. So this becomes my 1/4" foot, and I have a zipper foot attachment. So one of the first things that I'm going to do is show putting on that foot. But I wanted to let you know that there are many types of zipper feet, and all of them will be appropriate for this class. So there are, do I need to come closer, Sam?
No, you're
Okay, good. So with this zipper foot, I can move from the right to the left, right on my machine ankle. If I don't have a lot of needle position adjustment. I also have the E snap-on foot, and it's got the 2 grooves right and left. So with this one, I would be moving my needle positions. And these are available for any of our machines. Now, for those of you that have mechanical machines, I highly recommended the adjustable zipper foot, because on some of those mechanical machines, we do not have a lot of needle position movement. And these are available in both high shank and low shank. And with this particular one, the screw allows you to move the foot right and left, rather than moving your needle right and left. So there are a lot of different options available, and know that any one of these will work for this project. So I am going to put on my single dual feed foot, or the narrow AccuFeed. And when I'm putting that on, I've loosened my screw to get my grooved opening right around the threads in the screw. And I'm pushing towards me to make sure that the foot is all the way on, and I am going to tighten. And also on the back of the foot, I'm going to move my machine a little bit. Good.
Oh, no.
On the back of the foot, you want to make sure that the foot is engaged. And I put this on here purposely, not engaging the foot. And it's this part here that I'm talking about. So you want to run your finger up the back of this foot and engage and lock that into place. That will ensure that your upper feed dog is engaged with the machine. And what that means is the motor that moves my needle will now move that upper feed dog. And what we need to be on right now is our 1/4" or an A foot. Either will work. What we're going to be doing first is sewing together our strips that are, and I'm going to double check my measurements. These are the 4 to 5 strips for piping, and they are 2 inches wide by the 22 if you did this with fat quarters. And the reason I wrote these directions for fat quarters, there was a method to the madness. I've always walked into quilt shops and fabric stores and see a brand new line that comes out, and it has 4 or 5 different coordinating fabrics. And this is a perfect project to do with a bunch of different coordinating fabrics. I could do my pocket in one fabric. I could do the pillow front in another, the back, and utilize all of those coordinating fabrics. So I get asked a lot about putting together either binding or piping strips of fabric with a diagonal seam. And a lot of people say they have to rip it out several times to get that done correctly. And I'm going to show you my trick. So you want to lay fabrics right sides together, and you want to do that so that the fabrics are going in opposite directions, and I like to offset them a little bit so I have a little bit of fabric sticking out on either side, and it forms a V. Now, I rarely use pins, but for this, I'm going to place a pin because I'm going to be lifting this up and down a lot. So I'm just going to pin it so it's holding together. But the way I remember how to sew this, if you sew this in the opposite direction, and I'm going to show you what I mean. So if I sew together from this point to this point, when I open it up, I'm going to get a V and not a straight line. So the way I remember to do this is I hold my legs towards me and pretend this is a pair of pants. So the legs are facing down, and I want to sew across that waistband. So you see how that would be my pretend waistband? You can either draw this line in, you could fold it as I did, but that diagonal line is my sewing line. So that I'm going to bring this to the machine, I'm going to straighten this out, and I am going to sew from one corner to another. I am using a red tip needle. A lot of you might prefer a blue tip. I tend to work with a heavier needle. I have all-purpose thread in my machine, and I am at a straight stitch with a stitch length of 2.4. So what I am going to do is I am going to sew from one diagonal to another. And I love using our AccuFeed system. It just pulls so nicely. And now, when I open that up, I have a diagonal sewn line so that I eliminate bulk. So let's sew together all 5 pieces exactly the same way. So again, we're overlapping so that we have a V. I like to keep those legs on the left-hand side of the machine, and that way I know I am sewing on a diagonal, if I'm pretending these are pants, across the waistband. I do not want to sew that crotch line. And we'll do that for all 5 pieces. And I am not back tacking, I am not locking, and we're gonna trim those out and take care of those after we've done all 5. So this is the same way you put together strips for doing binding on a quilt. So we're learning some good basic skills here. And I'm sewing straight across. Now, if sewing straight is not your strong suit, you can very easily mark a line going across. And again, our sewn line, if these are my pant legs, I'm sewing what would be the waistband. And that's my trick for remembering how to sew this together. Now notice that my strip that I've sewn, I always keep face up. When I put my new strip down, I go right side to right side. Really important when you're working on solid fabrics, and sometimes it's hard to tell what's the right side and what's the wrong side. So I keep everything very consistent and orderly. So I'm going to move my phone towards me so that I could double check for questions. And I'm going to let everyone catch up with sewing their strips together. So I'm seeing Canada, Wyoming, Virginia, Delaware. Mitzi, thank you. I love this fabric color too. Everyone, so Donna, you're saying that you have low volume. Check the volume on your device, because so far I'm not hearing anyone else with a low volume. So on the needle that you're using, that will all depend on the fabric that you're using. But you will either want to use a blue tip or a red tip. So Emily or Marina, I'm seeing that some people need the instructions. If you could put up that link, that would be wonderful. So if you do not have the instructions and the fabric and everything pre-cut, I would really suggest following along and watching. We can go back after this is live, and you can follow along at your own pace. Now, I am just going to grab a scissor. For those of you at home, you're going to have an iron nearby, so you will probably be ironing. But what we are going to be doing now is trimming the excess of where we join this together. And here's my trick for eliminating dog ears. If you cut up and eliminate that excess, and eyeball 1/4 inch, I promise I will not send the quilting police to your home. So I am cutting and leaving approximately 1/4 inch, and I am eliminating all those thread tails, and we're going to do this at every join. So please let me know if I need to slow down, speed up, if I'm going at a good pace. Let me know if you're watching with hearts and thumbs up. So you see how I went straight and followed my fabric line. When I open that up, I will have no dog ears to trim by doing that little step right now. And I am trimming, and I am not being precise with my 1/4 inch. If you have to be precise, I understand some people have to be precise, and I will allow you to do that. And the next step that we are going to do is we are going to open up the seam and we are going to press. And I am just finger pressing, and if you want to do that as well, that will be fine. If you're doing this for binding, I do recommend pressing and really ironing that really nicely and nice and flat. The reason we do this diagonal seam is so that when fabric is folded over, like I'm showing right now, you do not get bulk. If this were a straight line and you're putting two seams, one on top of another, you get a lot of bulk, and that builds up as you're folding and doing multiple layers. So I really like attaching fabric strips with that diagonal seam. I am just taking a look. Gidget, I'm so happy that my tip makes this easier for you to join your fabrics. I just found that as I was a beginner, every time I joined fabric strips, I would have to rip apart at least twice because I was putting them in the wrong direction. And this method of thinking of it as pant legs made it easier for me, so I wanted to share that tip. So let's get a thumbs up. Has everyone attached and joined their fabrics that are following along? And now the next thing that we're going to get out is our cord that we're using for making the piping. So I'm going to place that to the side. I have a buildup of supplies that I'm going to clean up my area. And we are going to switch to the zipper foot. Now I'm going to show you why I chose the single dual feed foot, because I am able to switch to a zipper foot very easily. I am going to go to my extra high lift, and all I did was lift my lifter to the extra high position. If you are at, now this is a tip that you may not know, if your machine has an auto lift button where the foot goes up and down with the touch of a button, my 6700 does not have that feature. But if you do, if you lock your machine and hit that lifter button, you will go to extra high lift. That's how you get there. Now I'm touching the back of the foot and I'm pushing towards me, and that releases. The reason I like to go to extra high lift is it makes it easier to move my foot out of place. And now on the foot,
Fine. Yep.
good? Okay. There are little pins that stick out. I was trying to think of the word. Sam helped me there. So these little things that stick out are going to go into a notch into the foot. So I am going to line up those pins with that opening of the notch and push back, and it clicks into place. Isn't that easy? Now, with your other feet, zipper feet, I want you to adjust the needle, and I want it all the way to the left. So for me, I am moving my needle adjustment, and you'll see that as I'm turning my knob, my needle is moving towards the left. And I've moved it as far to the left as my machine will allow me to go. For everyone following along on a mechanical machine, you do not have a lot of needle adjustments. So you're going to adjust your foot so that the needle is all the way to the left. And I'm just double checking my instructions that I'm not missing anything. So what we're going to be doing now is we are going to be placing our cord in the middle of the fabric. Now, for those of you who sewed like speed demons, I'm going to tell you to slow down a little bit. My machine is at medium. The line is right in the middle of the double triangle. So Lisa, does the zipper foot work on the HP foot on the M7? No, you're looking at the HP2 foot, which looks very similar to the one that I have. I do believe that the narrow AccuFeed is an optional accessory for you. And when you're getting the single dual feed foot, it does come with the VD and ED foot. But you do want to get the narrow AccuFeed, not the HP2. And I'll let you in on a secret. That's the foot I took out this morning as I was setting up, and I realized that I had to get the other foot. So you're not alone. Now, we're going to start sewing this, and I want to leave about 2 inches unsewn. So when I put this under the foot, you're going to see I have a tail to the back of my machine, and I do not want to sew. I want to leave that open. I rarely pin. If you must pin, please do. But I'm going to show you my trick. I work in small spurts. Wherever I can hold the fabric comfortably and control it is all I am going to sew at one time. To get nice and tight, rather than holding my fabric straight, I'm going to angle it a little bit to the right. So here's straight, here's angled, and I'm going to go at a slow speed. Now, my machine made a funny noise, so I know I need to check my threading. So whenever you hear a funny noise on your machine, it does not get better. Please double check.
Look at the top. See there's still in take-up lever?
And I came out of my take-up lever, so I am going to rethread. Now, I get asked a lot, why does thread come up out of the take-up lever? It happens. Thread is thread. We're people and we fall apart and break. I expect that thread, if people can't remain and be invincible, my thread won't be either. So now I'm going to show you, it's a great opportunity to show you where the superior needle threader, that is the one with the claw. It looks like a little V in the front. And on this one, I have a lever on the side of the machine. And many of you have this feature. So I want to do needle up, needle down. I want to lower my foot. I want to put my thread in that claw. And notice how I'm tugging. Is my shoulder in the way?
No, I can see it.
And if I am bringing up bobbin thread, I leave that the way it is. If I am not, I cut my thread. Now here's a mistake that most people make. They hold this really lightly. I like to support on the bottom of the machine with my thumb. And I want to eye, and I want to go all the way down, and I pause for a second before I lift up. That pause at the bottom is really important because it helps you to make sure that you've gone all the way down. And now we're good and we could get going again. We got an extra lesson in a needle threader, which is always good. I am moving my fabric to the right. So Deborah, does this work better than the piping foot? So the piping foot, as you get to larger cording, the piping doesn't always fit in there well. My preferred way is with the zipper foot. How about you, Sam?
I like using the boarding foot.
So Sam likes the other. What I would say is try both and see what you like best. Now notice how I said I was going to control my fabric, and now I'm going to rearrange my fabric, rearrange my cord, and I work in short spurts. And we are going to sew all of this piping together, and your sewing should be fairly close, and I'm going to pull that around. So on the green, you're able to see that. You should be fairly close to that cord. And we're going to do this for all of our pieces that we put together. This is our cording that we're going to be putting around our pillow. And go at a speed that is comfortable for you. And we're going to do all of that cording. I am going to speed up so that I will be a little bit ahead of you and I will be able to check for questions. But sew at a speed that's comfortable for you. And when I'm going over those seams like I'm about to now, because of that diagonal seam, it just goes over it smoothly, makes it really easy. So for those that couldn't hear what Sam said, he prefers the cording foot, Sam, is that what you said?
Yes.
So the cording foot is his preference. But I will tell you there's no right and wrong. You really need to try it because what will work and be a preference for one person may not work for you. So that's what taking classes is about. Learning different methods, trying different methods to see what works best for you. And you may come up with a method that's completely different than all of us and be the next new thing. Wouldn't that be wonderful? And when you're reaching the end, I also want to leave a couple of inches unsewn at the end. This will save you from getting your seam ripper and opening up that seam at the end. So I am going to leave just a little bit open. And I am not locking. So there is my piping. I'm going to double check for questions. It looks like everyone is keeping up with me. So we've done the, made the piping. And I'm going to set my piping aside. So I have a nice long strip and I'm going to set that aside. Am I okay to go on to the next step? Let me get some thumbs up. So Lisa, I am not locking because when I put the piping onto the pillow, I will be sewing over these points. If you lock, fine. Nothing wrong with that, but I tend not to lock when I know I'm going to be sewing over and that seam will be caught in another seam, so to speak. So I am going to go to our pocket material. So we should have a pocket front and a pocket back. I have used two different fabrics to make it easy for everyone to see. So again, I used another border print. I just think these are so nice to use. I am going to clean up my sewing area a little bit. Now, at this point, if you were using a plain fabric or you wanted to do embellishment, embroidery, decorative stitches, applique, I would do this at this point prior to putting the pillow together and prior to sewing the pocket together. We cut 3 pieces of fabric 2.5 inches by 18 for binding. We will need one of those binding pieces, and I would like you to fold and press in half with the right sides out. So pretty side of the fabric out, wrong sides together, and we're going to fold in half, and we're going to bind the top of our pocket rather than sewing it, turning it inside out and pressing. I wanted another little detail to this. So I'm going to give everyone a moment to pull out their one binding piece. Fold in half, wrong sides together, right sides out, and we're going to fold in half and press. Now, with binding, I'm going to go over and we're going to cover binding, and I'm not going to do corners with this particular project. So this is a good way to learn and experiment and play with this for doing this. Normally, when binding is done, we sew to the front, flip and turn to the back. When we're going to completely do our binding by machine, and we are not doing any hand sewing, hand is a 4-letter word. Sam is laughing at me because he knows I hate hand sewing. What we are going to do is we are going to sew on the wrong side or the back side, and I do this for a quilt as well. So I have my binding with the right side of my pocket and the lining side of my fabric, and I have them wrong sides together. So the pretty print is on the outside, and what will be the inside of the pocket is what I have facing up. Now with the folded binding, the raw edge is meeting up with the raw edge. And with the 1/4 inch, and I'm now going to switch to my 1/4 inch foot. So for those of you following along, we are going to switch to the 1/4 inch foot. So most of you are going from one snap-on foot to another. I am using my AccuFeed, so I snapped on. And I move your needle position or go to the correct stitch for your 1/4 inch piecing. So on the 6700, this is a 9mm machine, so I go to a needle position of 8.3. In the quilting category of your decorative stitches, you will find a stitch, usually number 2, that says P 1/4 inch. This will automatically move your needle position to the correct spot. So what I am going to do now is I am going to sew my binding onto my pillow pocket. And I'm making sure that my fabrics are together and in the right place. And again, I am lining up with the guide for that 1/4 inch foot, whatever foot you're using, and we are sewing. And the reason I am sewing twice, it's very helpful to make your settings on your machine correct, which I did not. We all make mistakes. And we are sewing that 1/4 inch. I'm double checking for any questions. I got people from all over the world. Fran, I agree. Sam is awesome. He's a very talented educator. So I'm glad that you were able to take classes with him. I think we'll all be so happy when classes start up again. Now, what we're going to be doing is, I am finger pressing, but we're going to press. Better?
Yep.
We're going to press on that back side so we get nice and flat. When I go to the right side, here's my trick. I am going to fold, and we're going to want to get really close. Or let me know. Okay. I am folding, and I am folding over so I just barely cover my stitching line, and my stitching line is right there. So for me, I'm going to cover over also that little bit of that border print, and we are going to press. And when you press this, what's really nice about pressing and doing this, it almost eliminates the need for pins. But if you do need to add a couple of pins, please do. Please remember, do not sew over pins. Now I'm going to switch my foot. No, I actually don't need to because I have a wide opening here. When I sew binding on by machine, I can do a couple of things. I can top stitch right on the very, very edge of that binding. I can do a decorative stitch, or I could do a blanket stitch. So I am going to go to stitch number 7, which is a blanket stitch. And I always look at my screen to pay attention to which side the teeth are going. And I know I need to move that so that the teeth are facing the right-hand side. And that moves my needle to the starting position. So many of our machines have multiple blanket stitches and decorative stitches, and you might see an R, an L, an M, and this is the starting position of that. So I have selected a blanket stitch. I like a little bit longer of a blanket stitch. So my setting is at the width, I'm at a 2.5, and I'm actually going to make that 3. And my length, I like a 4, but this is personal preference. I really like the way the blanket stitch looks. At this point, you may want to switch thread and really coordinate the thread to what you're doing. You may also like to use an open toe foot as an option for this. The F2 foot is completely open to help see. And I like to slow down as I am doing this. And I want my needle to drop right on that outside edge and hover. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew half of this, and I am going to take it off of the machine and give you a close-up. So my needle drop is hovering right along that green line. So what that does, it's stitch in the ditch and blanket stitch at the same time. So all I see are the teeth. And because I've matched that up on the back, you're going to get fairly close. And here I'm a little off because to me on the front, it was more important to cover that print. But I am not as concerned as what the back looks like. I want perfect stitching on the front. And this is why we sew on the back side and flip to the front. So now I'm going to continue with that sewing, and we are going to stitch that front pocket. And this is just a really nice touch, a nice way to add a different color, a contrast to this pillow pocket. For those of you that have machines with a magnifier, the magnifier I find really helpful when doing detailed work like this. And we have our pocket front. Did everyone have fun doing that? Fran, I'm so happy you love that magnifier. I don't know what I would do without it. Is everyone who's following along finishing up with that pocket, front pocket? Give me some thumbs up, some hearts. Perfect. So now we're going to be doing the same thing with our two back pieces. So our two back pieces were 18 by 10 or 11. I don't have those instructions near me. And we're going to do the same thing, and I am looking at fabric that is virtually the same on the front as the back. So we're going to put our two pieces together with the wrong sides together, right sides out, and we're going to fold and press our two other pieces of binding, and we are going to put those on as well. So same as we did on the front, I am going to put the binding to what would be my wrong side. Remember to go back to a straight stitch. And we're going to sew the binding on. And I said this was a perfect beginner class for those of you who wanted to learn quilting. And even for my garment sewers, I like to do binding on a lot of garments as well as a finishing. It's what's called a Hong Kong seam. So when I don't line something, for jackets especially, this will clean up that inside of the seam. So I've done step one. I'm going to do the same on my second. These are the back flaps, the closure for the back of the pillow that we're adding binding to. And I came out of my take-up lever, and that's because I was trying to rush the machine. And I'm back in my take-up lever. Some instructors hate when things like that happen. I actually really like when things go not perfectly, because that really shows you that it happens to all of us and it's not a big deal. Now everyone is noticing I'm working with my stop-start button. I do not sew with a foot pedal. You are more than welcome to. So I thank everyone for the compliments. I'm glad that everyone is following along and that you're following along and that everything is looking good. So I have put my binding on the back side of both of my pillow flaps. So now you will most likely want to press. I am finger pressing, and we are going to flip to the right side, and we're going to stitch this in place. Now, I am going to do on the back side a decorative stitch for the back, just because I can. So I am going to a stitch that a lot of people refer to this as chicken feet. I haven't been looking at chicken feet too closely, but that's what everyone seems to call this. So what I am going to do is use a decorative stitch, and I am guiding the opening of my foot so that it is centered on my binding, and that is going to, and this thread is just not very happy today. And there I go. And we are sewing down the binding on our two back pieces. Now, some of those decorative stitches on the machine are absolutely beautiful. You could also do lettering here, handmade by Grandma, with all my love, Mommy. Get creative with this. I always, when I do projects and I do classes, I get what I call throwaway fabric. If I ruin and don't get it right and everything isn't just perfect, I don't feel badly about throwing it away. And I always recommend that with classes. But as you make more than one of these, and I hope you do make many, really get creative with what you put on that binding, and also with your thread choices, with contrasting thread, variegated thread. I happen to really love working with variegated threads. How is everyone doing with following along? Wonderful. And I'm doing my last one where I am going to be doing that decorative stitching. So please, a close-up of the chicken feet, sure. I haven't gotten too close to too many chicken feet. So let me know if that looks like chicken feet to you. Sam's laughing at me. Sam, have you gotten very close to many chicken feet?
No.
No, I didn't think so. And I am just finishing up with the stitching of that pillow back. And we have done the most difficult part of this class with what we've just done. And I know I had quite a few people that had messaged me and sent messages that they were really concerned because they were beginners. But I really didn't think that anyone would have a terrible time following along. So please let me know if you're able to follow along. And if my pace. So Fran, Sam laughed at you too. At least I know it isn't personal. So here are my chicken feet flaps. So I have both done. And these are going to be my envelope closing for my pillow. So I'm going to double check with the instructions and where I'm at now. And we are going to go to pillow assembly. So I think we're going to move over here, Sam.
Okay.
Perfect. So what we're going to need is the 18 by 18 piece of fabric and our pillow pocket.
Which side are you going to sit on, left or right?
Right here. I don't know, Sam, you can't read my mind yet to know where I'm going and what I'm doing? Sam and I started with Janome right around the same time, and we shared an office for quite a long time. So I am amazed that he's not able to read my mind with what I'm doing. So Jamie, I'm very glad that you're happy with the project, that you've been wanting to make these. These are just a lot of fun and a great gift to make. And actually, if you follow and help with the little one, a really easy project for the little ones to do. And I'm just following. So we're going to pin and place the pillow pocket. I tend to put my pins not towards the edge of my project because I am really bad with stopping and remembering to pull pins out. And you do not want to sew over pins. It may not do anything to the machine the first time you do it, but know that when you repeatedly sew over pins, you can really cause mechanical damage. So now what we're going to be doing is working with our piping. So we're going to be getting our piping that we made. And the one thing to remember with the piping is raw edge to raw edge. So the finished side of the piping is going to go to the inside. And I want to start around the center of the bottom. I left an area unsewn and I want to leave that. And what I want to do is I want to leave a section unsewn. So I am going to pin. And my pins seem to have disappeared, so I'm not going to be pinning as often as you probably will. And when we get to the corner, I want to make cuts. I'm going to go a little before, I'm going to make 3 to 4 cuts right around that corner, making sure not to cut my thread. because what I want to be able to do is turn and get a corner. Do I need to lift that up?
No?
Nope.
You should be able to see it.
Perfect. So notice how I got that corner. Right over here. And we're gonna pin and make sure if you pin nowhere else but the corner, you want to do that really well. And where the pocket lines up and matches up with that front piece, you also want to pin and secure in place. And as you're moving and pinning, thank you, Sam. He found my pin cushions and pins. I know Miriam says that you really must have a cute pin cushion. And I'm thinking about how I'm going to sew this, and I want the head of the pin to be to the right so that as I'm sewing, I can remove the pin easily. And we're going to go around and we are going to pin in place. And I'm coming to another corner, so I'm going to show that again. I'm coming about an inch before the corner and I am making cuts. So I'm going to show that spread out. See how I'm making little cuts? And that helps me to get to the corner and turn my piping, and what I want to do is force that corner and line up the edge of my piping with the edge of that fabric, and that's going to give me a nice corner to the piping. This is where you want to take time, otherwise your corners will look kind of rounded and just not lay pretty. And we're coming to another corner. Now, I was working with fabric that I had. If your fabric is really lightweight, almost see-through, you might want to interface that fabric to give it some body, and I did that with my pillow front. Because although this was the right shade of pink, the fabric was not the best. It was a little thin. And I'm going to pin all around. How's everyone doing with the pinning and the piping? I'm on my last corner. Better to have more slits than not enough. It just makes pinning in place. Wonderful. And again, I'm forcing that corner and pinning it. Now, lots of people will instruct, and I want to leave a good 10-inch opening at the bottom. so that when I join my two pieces together, it makes it easier to join them together. Now, some people would say, put the pillow back on here and sew all together. I like to do this in 2 steps. I like to get my zipper foot and I like to sew my piping to my front and then work with the back pieces, because I'm going to flip my project around and I will be able to follow my sewing lines to see what I'm doing. When you sandwich in a piping in the middle, it's sometimes very difficult to see. So I'm going to move back to the machine, Sam, and we are going to put our zipper foot back on to sew around that piping and get nice and close. I put everything in here and now I'm searching and looking. So we're going to put that zipper foot back on, or the piping foot if you're using that. And I'm going to go to extra high lift to remove my sewing foot. And I am going to go to my zipper foot. And I want to leave a nice wide opening at the bottom. So I'm leaving a nice big tail. I am going to go to a straight stitch. Biggest mistake you could make is not remembering to switch to the different stitches. And I've moved my needle position so that it's hugging my piping, so it's all the way to the left. I have mine at the 0, 0 position. Now I'm going to grab my pin cushions so I don't wind up poking myself as I'm putting pins all over. So as I'm sewing, I am going to remove pins because it is not a good idea to sew over pins. I'm reducing my speed and I'm sewing really close. And when I get to the corner, I do not want you to turn the corner. I want you to sew to that edge and stop and turn your fabric. If your machine has the pivot feature, this would be a good time to turn on that pivot feature. And I'm starting a little bit above where that piping is, and I'm sewing into that seam so that I have a seam that forms like an X. Does that make sense? I'm going to move my questions closer to me. So Nellie, yes, I'm basically basting this in place and giving myself a guideline, because when I try to sew so many multiple layers together, it is easy for something to shift, move, and this just allows it to go on perfectly the first time, where I'm not doing as much ripping out. I'm not a fan of ripping out. I don't think anyone is. How about you, Sam?
No.
No. Now, when I'm going over that pocket, what I'm going to do is reverse. And I'm going to reinforce where that pocket is. And I'm going to do that twice, because little ones are going to be handling this, and they're probably not going to be super careful. Now, the other reason that I like the AccuFeed foot in doing this, I'm going over multiple layers, and you'll notice I have no bunching. Sometimes when you use just the standard foot, you wind up unpinning and repinning because fabric shifts and moves, and I don't get that with the AccuFeed. So I'm at another corner. I'm going to go past my piping to the edge, and I am going to turn my fabric around, and I am going to start at the edge, sewing into the seam I just made. It also reinforces those corners. And I'm seeing my screen move. Nellie, if you're not using your AccuFeed, you need to be able to take that out and play with it. And this is a great project to do that with. I don't think I would be able to function without AccuFeed. And most people, once they start using it, realize the same thing. And especially with this foot that we're using, if you're making handbags and sewing zippers, this is a game changer. So notice I am going fairly slow. Go at your own speed. How is everyone doing with keeping up with me? I haven't heard any complaints. It's hard when you can't see what people are doing in front of you to know how to pace yourself. So that's why I'm constantly asking. When I teach a live class, I'm always looking up to see where everyone is. So Nellie, I think you're going to have a new best friend with your AccuFeed foot. And I am going over that pillow pocket edge. So I am going in reverse a couple of times to really reinforce that. And as I'm sewing, I'm making sure that all of my fabric lines up nicely with the edge. So the 500E does not have AccuFeed because it does not sew. On your 9900, Sam, do you recall if that has AccuFeed?
I don't think so. They can use the walking foot?
I am not sure if it does, but I would go to the manual and double check if it came with AccuFeed. What AccuFeed is a built-in walking foot. On a standard walking foot, you have a bar that rests on your needle screw. And it's relying on that needle going up and down and that bar keeping up with what you're sewing. And if you sew fast, it can't always keep up with you perfectly. The built-in walking foot, that connection that it makes in the back, the motor that's driving my needle is driving my feed dogs. And what I'm going to do is, at some point, I'm going to have Sam show a close-up of that upper feed and how it moves. Now I've gone around all four corners and I've left an opening. And now comes the difficult part. How am I going to join and put all of these together? What do you think, Sam? Should we just leave it like this?
Yeah.
So what I am going to do is I am going to look at where the middle of my opening is and cut excess. An eyeball is fine. If you do not have the opening where I asked you to leave unsewn at one end, you're going to get a seam ripper and you're going to open up that seam a little bit because we will need to have an opening.
There's no AccuFeed on 99.
So the 9900 does not have AccuFeed, I'm very sorry to say. So you will be using a standard walking foot, but you've learned something that on your next machine, you may be asking for an AccuFeed foot. Now, on my other end, I am going to overlap and I am going to cut so that I have an overlap. Does everyone see that? Now, I need to open up my seam a little bit. You seam rippers, don't do what I'm doing, all this craziness. So I need to open it up so that the two open ends overlap. On one of them, I am cutting where that cording is to where that seam starts. On the opposite end, I'm going to match up where that matching point is and cut. I may need to cut a tiny bit more. And I just want those two pieces to overlap. And what I'm going to do is fold under about 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to overlap those two pieces. And I'm going to sew across. Is it making sense why I did not lock my seams? Because when you have to open that up and cut and adjust, it's difficult ripping out those locking stitches. And I overlapped my seams. So for Anne, the 6600 has an AccuFeed foot. It was Janome's first machine with an AccuFeed foot. It's going to look a little bit different than the one I am using, but it works in the same way. So now what I have is my piping sewn all around my pillow, and I'm going to get rid of all these pieces that I have cut up. And we are going to do our pillow backs now, right side to right side, and we're going to match up raw edge to raw edge, and our binding in the center of the pillow. And these pieces will overlap. So you will only see one of those bound edges. I am going to have you pick up your pillow and flip upside down so that you are looking at the back side of what we've just sewn. And I am going to have you pin in place. Now this is white on white. I don't know, Sam, why didn't you warn me to use a colored bobbin? That was your job. And as you can see, I'm pinning in place. Where my two pieces overlap, I'm being careful to really make sure that I pin and hold those pieces in place. I explained to you, I put my pins on the interior. All I need my pins to do is hold my fabric. This way I do not have to think about and worry about pulling the pins out as I'm sewing. This is a good way. I teach beginners and little ones, like 8, 9-year-olds. So I've gotten so used to doing this as a safety precaution with the little ones that I just continue to do this. So now we are going to go back to the machine and we are sewing right on top of the line that we just previously sewed. I don't want to go too far into the pillow because I'll be sewing my piping. And again, I like to cross my seams at the corner to reinforce them. And I am going to sew all around all 4 edges, getting as close to that previously sewn line. Now, Sam, someone asked to see the upper feed dog, so if you could come in close. On the narrow, sorry about that, we didn't mean to drop you. So as I sew, I'm going to go super, super slow. Right in here, that is my upper feed dog controlling my fabric. And every time that needle moves, it's in perfect coordination with the needle because the motor is guiding that upper feed dog. I do not have a bar going from my walking foot onto my needle screw that moves that upper feed dog mechanism. That is the difference between AccuFeed and a standard walking foot. A built-in walking foot, an AccuFeed system, is 100% accurate regardless of what fabric I am using. I have a differential feed or an adjustment that if I'm doing minky and cotton or burlap and satin, I can adjust so that I get no puckering top or bottom. And that is the big difference with getting that. So the AccuFeed and the dual feed system are the same, absolutely the same. 2 names, 1 thing. You'll see it called AccuFeed, AccuFeed Flex, the dual feed. So it is one amazing foot with many names and options. Perfect. So we're good with that close up now. And I am sewing around all 4 sides of the pillow. How is everyone doing with keeping up? Help. How do I work this HP 2 foot? You cannot use the HP 2 foot because you are not able to get the adjustments that you need. So you either need to go to a zipper foot or to the AccuFeed, the single AccuFeed, the narrow one.
I think that's what she thinks you're using.
So this is the narrow or single dual feed. It has an ED attachment that I'm using and a VD attachment that I used earlier. So the AccuFeed system will come with your machine when you purchase it. It is never an add-on purchase. If it does not come with your machine from the beginning, it is not available for your machine. What is available if you have the AccuFeed system is you may have other adapters or bottoms available. So in the AccuFeed, there is a 1/4-inch adapter, the OD foot. There is a stitch in the ditch attachment, and I can't remember the letters on that foot.
SD.
SD, wonderful.
Or Yeah, ST. Stitch.
So there's stitch in the ditch, 1/4 inch, open toe, standard, and 1/4 inch available. So I like to use this for binding, whether it's the narrow or the opening. So the narrow has 2 adapters, and the Janome website has all of the information on all of these part numbers. And I am coming up to my last seam. You know what that means, Sam?
You're almost done.
We're done. So the Acu guide is a seam allowance guide that snaps onto a machine, and I do not have the one for the machine that I am at, but I do happen to have one handy. So if this were the correct one for the machine that I am using, it almost looks like a J for Janome. This would snap onto your machine, and I said this is not the correct one for this machine. And it will guide, and you guide this lip, and I'm going to put it on color so you see this part that sticks up, to your markings on your plate, and you would be able to get a 1/2 inch allowance. So if this were the correct one, I would guide to my lip and sew, and this guide keeps my fabric straight. So that is the Acu guide, and Acu feed is the built-in walking foot. So I am removing all my pins because we are going to turn this around and we are going to unveil. But now for my corners, I am going to cut and clip my corners. I leave about 1/8 of an inch to that corner that I cut. The sewing room here, you may have seen the serger set up. You can go back and serge all of these edges. You can do an overcasting or a zigzag stitch to clean up these edges. How about cutting some more binding and binding that inside edge? Sam's laughing at me again. I know I'm going crazy, Sam. So now I'm going to turn the pillow inside out. With binding the inside seams, when I do little zipper bags or makeup bags, I do bind the inside of them because it just gives a really beautiful finished edge, especially when I'm doing that as a gift. I'm loving this. How beautiful. I'm going to admit, as old as I am, I have a stuffed animal that I've had since I was a child. So my little stuffed animal, Freddie, is going to go in here. And he's going to have a beautiful little home. And a dear friend of mine made a little doll for me, whose name is Lulabelle. So she will go in here too. Sam is laughing, shaking his head because he even knows who made it for me. So this is that beautiful reading pillow. Just really nice to have the bindings. I would put an 18-inch pillow form if you like a very stuffed pillow. If you like it to be a little bit less stuffed, go with the 16-inch pillow form. But that is our finished pillow. It's a great way to utilize fat quarters, and especially when it's for a complete line of fabric. But I just like, and I'm going to poke those corners out, the way the piping finishes off on this pillow. I am going to grab my phone. I am going to check for any messages I might have missed. Marge asked why I did not miter and turn on my corners. When I'm doing pillows, especially where I'm turning inside out, if you just go to the stitching to a perfect miter, it's not as secure. When you overlap, you're getting overlapping stitches, and it helps secure, especially when you're cutting the corners and you're turning inside out. So it just gives me a little bit of a more secure finish. Either would work. So I am seeing no more questions.
She's asking you where can she look for the video after class?
So the videos after class, if you go to our main page, the Janome sewing machine page is where everything is housed. You will see a tab named video, and all of the live videos from both pages are found on that page. Also on the sewing machine page, I'm going to go to that and show it to you.
Somebody's asking where's the instruction in the supply list located?
The instructions and the supply list, a link is provided in the link as you go through. So on the Janome sewing machine page, let me know when I need to stop, Sam.
Yeah, I'll just shrink it in.
Okay.
This is the home page, basically.
This is the home page for the page we're on right now, the sewing machine classroom. If you go to the watch party tab,
It's not on the phone, is it?
right there. Did I just shut that off by
Nope,
putting?
you can see it.
Okay. When you go into that tab, it'll bring up videos, and you scroll through them to look for what you're looking for. And they will usually have a subject line. So this one is on ruler foot quilting, and as I scroll, I will see different ones. So this is the one that we did on the different machine types. And that's how to go back to the different pages. So, any other questions, Sam?
There's too
No?
many coming through. Not really.
Okay.
Somebody says supply list again is where?
If you look through the comments for this page, the link for the supply list and the full instructions, so you could make many more reading pillows, is there, and I believe Marina will put that link on again. So as you watch this video, look in the comments, you'll see the link for the full instructions, and you'll find that where you'll be able to print that, and like I said, make your very own. Perfect. So I am going to say goodbye to everyone. It was my pleasure having you here today. So at 3 o'clock is a live on the Janome sewing machine page. And the Janome sewing machine page is more feature driven. So that will show you how to use a certain foot, what a certain feature is about. Whereas this page is doing complete projects. So you understand the two. And on the Janome sewing machine page is live explaining how to get to the different components of our different Facebook pages. So make sure to look for that one.
Somebody asked you use a regular plate with the AccuFeed foot.
I used the standard plate. I did not use a straight stitch plate because I was moving needle positions. And when you're moving needle positions, you really want to use that zigzag plate.
Decorative stitch.
And I did some decorative stitching, as Sam pointed out. So that's why I used the zigzag plate.
That's it.
All right, bye-bye. See everyone soon.